Hi BookTube, Sarah here, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with a fun tag video. Today I'm going to be doing the supermarket shopping tag. This was created by Jason over at Byways in Bookland? Yes, Byways in Bookland. And I was tagged by the always entertaining Steve Donahue. So thank you, Steve, for tagging me in this one. So this one, when I saw Steve do this video, and when I looked back at the questions after he tagged me, I kind of thought, I'm not too sure. But I sat down and I looked at the questions and I looked at my answers. And what I typically do with tags is that the first thing that comes to my mind is what I write down. Because I think that's kind of the fun thing in a tag, is that I don't know if you're really supposed to go into them with like a list or anything at all like that. It's kind of fun to write down the first thing that comes to your mind. So that's what I did for this one. And yeah, I thought this one was a lot of fun. A little different than most tags. Very, very creative on Jason's behalf. So great job on this one, Jason. But yeah, so let's jump in and get started. Question number 1 is list. Before going book shopping, including virtually, do you have a list? And to answer that, I would say very rarely. If I am shopping for something in person, if I'm going to my big box store like a Walmart or the big book chain up here, Chapters Indigo, or a thrift store, typically no, I don't necessarily go with a list. Occasionally I do, like I did last week when I talked about this in my last vlog. I went in when my husband and I had to go to Walmart to do some grocery shopping. I ended up picking up 3 books that I knew I wanted, because Harlequin this summer has released a set of 4 bind-ups called Summer Reads. And they, I had picked up one of the bind-ups, but I wanted the other 3. So I went kind of with a specific purpose over to the book area in Walmart to search for something. If I go, other than that, I typically really only shop at thrift stores. And there you can't go with a list. You find what you find, and that's part of the fun of a thrift bookstore, right? And same with a used bookstore or anything at all like that, or a charity shop. And online, though, I do specifically am usually looking for a book, because the thing with online is that it's kind of hard to browse. You know, you can browse through like the new releases or what have you, but it's not the same as it is going into a physical bookstore. So typically if I'm buying online, I'm buying with a specific purpose from Amazon or Book Depository or what have you. Question number 2, fruit and veg. Good for the body and mind. Recommend a book you felt improved your physical and mental health. So this one, again, the first thing that came to my mind, and it was a book called Yoga Girl by Rachel Brathen. I actually follow her on Instagram, and she's pretty awesome. I have to get back into yoga again. I used to do it for years and years and years. And, you know, the older I get, the harder it is to do certain things, like, you know, stand up from the couch or bend over and touch my toes. So I did read this book a number of years ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I recommend it if you're into yoga or anything like that. It's got some beautiful photography. She is very, very talented. And yeah, it's a really good book, and it kind of talks about her journey and you know, her way of life. And it's kind of a nice way to look at things a little bit differently. She has a very slower paced lifestyle than the rest of us do, I'm sure. And yeah, it was just really, really delightful to read. Next one, tinned goods, or as we would say here in North America, canned goods. Regardless of the label on the can, the contents are all too often bland. What is your tin can genre? So in other words, what genre of book do you find, I guess, boring? That's how I'm reading that question. And I am prepared for the onslaught of people giving me grief for this. I'm going to say classics. I am not a fan of classics. If you guys have been watching me for a while, you know this. I have read Jane Austen, a couple of them, Sense and Sensibility, and... No, I read Pride and Prejudice, and I read Emma. I have also read... Actually, I did really like Dracula. And I've also read... Oh, why am I drawing a blank? I read it last year. Another one. If I remember, I'll pop the cover up here. I just don't care for them. They're not my cup of tea. You know, as simple as that. I just, they're not. And a lot of people are like, well, but you love romance. How can you not love Jane Austen? I'm sorry. I find them boring, to be completely honest. I love historical romances, and as I've said before, historical romances, a lot of them, like modern historical romances, are not at all anyway historically accurate. And I get that. And I'm not living in a delusional world thinking that they are. But there's just like they're more modern, and I guess that's my personal preference. Each to their own. I'm not saying that all classics are bad. Like I just said, I really enjoyed Dracula. And there are probably going to be a handful more that I really enjoy, but overall, as a genre, I am not a fan of classics. Number 4, meat fish counter. Prepared by a skilled butcher, fishmonger, just how you want it. Tell us about a book that you felt was written just for you. So, the first book that immediately came to my mind was a book that I actually read back in February. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that we had a family tragedy in January, and I lost my dad and to cancer, which is horrible. And this book I read in like less than a month after he passed away. And this book wasn't necessarily written for me, but it spoke to me at the time that I read it. And the book is I Owe You One by Sophie Kinsella, which I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, it's a chick lit, like, you know. But in this book, our main character lost her dad 10 years ago. And throughout reading this book, it showed me that, you know, just because it's been a longer time doesn't mean that you still can't miss and grieve the person. You know, you're not living in a perpetual fog, you know, 10 years later, but you can still remember the person fondly, and you get to that point where you can laugh about things, you know, antics and things like that that have happened. And yeah, again, it just really, really spoke to me, and I gave this book 5 stars when I read it. And like I said when I reviewed the book originally, that had I read it at a different point in my life, I don't think I would have rated it as high as I did. But if it was the right book for the right time, if that makes sense, and I really, really loved it. Next up, baked goods. Bread is a staple for many around the world. Who is an author you can easily digest any time of day? Jill Shalvis, hands down. Jill Shalvis has not disappointed me yet. She is an absolute gem of an author. I encourage everyone to read her. I know even within the romance community, there are not a lot of people who have read Jill Shalvis. I did an entire video on my top 5 Jill Shalvis books. Shameless plug. I will leave it linked in the description box below. Please go check it out for my top 5. But none of her books are a disappointment. They are fun. They are quirky. They have great characters. Always something in there that's going to make you smile. You know, they have the happily ever after that I think we all need right now. And they do get a little spicy. So that's always a bonus for some people. But they are really, really delightful, and I highly recommend them. Number 6, the chilled section. Which I guess would that be like your milk section maybe? I'm not sure. Recommend a cool new author or a book you recently discovered. And this book I just finished last week, and I gave it 5 stars, and it was East Coast Girls by Carrie Kletter, I think is her last name. Kletter. The cover, of course, will be right up here. This is a women's fiction novel. If you like Nancy Thayer, if you like, what is her name? Mary Kay Andrews, I can definitely see you enjoying this one. It's about 4 girls who have been friends since they were little kids, and now they're, you know, approaching their 30th birthday, and an event that happened the summer between high school and college kind of not tore them apart. Some of them still stayed friends, but one of the friends isn't really, they're not talking to one of the 4 girls. And as the book slowly unfolds, you start to find out what that thing was, that event that took place, and the consequences of the fallout of that. And it was absolutely fantastic. I thought it was great. I absolutely loved it. And this is an author, this might be her debut work, but don't quote me. But regardless, it was the first book by her that I've ever read, and I highly recommend it. And I'm definitely looking forward to more books by her. Next is the Frozen section. Tell us about a book that gave you the shivers. And the first book that I thought of for this one was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I read this one, I think, last year. Now, I had read Lisa Jewell before, and I liked it, but I wasn't like, oh my god, Lisa Jewell is amazing, until I read this book. And this is, of course, a thriller, and there's not much I can tell you about it other than it's about a young girl who disappears, and what happens in the aftermath. And this book goes back and forth in time from different characters' perspectives. I've read it, my mom's read it, my mom's sister's read it, and all of us have talked about it. And there's like a couple scenes in this book that I obviously can't tell you guys about, but that just make me go, you know, like, oh, it was so good. And not shivers like things that go bump in the night, but shivers to the fact of what if something had happened, the situation would have had a different outcome. Do you know what I mean? Like those kind of shivers. Fantastic. In my opinion, my favorite book by her, or the best book by her so far. And I've read a number of them now, but this one, hands down, was a definite favorite. Next up, beer, wine, spirits. Name one of the first books you read that made you feel like an adult. I just love that. And the first book that came to my mind for this one was The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. When I was younger, we really didn't have much of a YA section in the bookstore. I think it was more like children's and then adults. Like that was it. Like there was no, it didn't seem like there was a big middle ground for us. I'm trying to remember a lot of the more YA books that were out at that time. And, I'm drawing, it's not like it is now where, you know, there's Twilight, there's Harry Potter, there is like these huge staples of YA literature. I mean, there are whole sections of the bookstore now. We never had that. So we kind of went right from like younger work right to more adult work. And I remember finding this one in a thrift store, I think it was, and I saw the cover and I thought, ooh. So I ended up picking it up because I did go through quite the phase where I was reading a lot of Anne Rice. I was reading a lot of, this was like my gateway into that. After this book, I ended up reading, oh gosh, Interview with the Vampire, our version of Twilight, where we didn't have sparkly vampires. We had vampires that actually might want to kill you. And I went on to read Dean Koontz. I read a lot of Robin Cook. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that author, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Dean Koontz, but Robin Cook wrote more medical like thrillers. I could only take so many of those because they were very, very creepy. But yeah, I really liked those as well. And then I eventually, into my early 20s, found romance, and I haven't looked back since. But no, definitely The Witching Hour. I have distinct memories being at school with that book, and it was like huge. It was like, what, 700 pages long? I can't remember how long it was, but with that old mass market paperback sitting leaning against my locker at lunch and reading that book, I have distinct memories of that. So number 9, sweets/candy. What genre author is your indulgence when you need a little treat read? So I know for a lot of people this answer would probably be romance. But romance is my go-to, so I can't really answer it as romance. And the first thing I thought of was, of course, right now, if you've been watching me for a bit, you know I'm rereading The Babysitter's Club and Nancy Drew, and of course my beloved Sweet Valley High. These were, you know, my jam early in high school. These were the ones I read before I moved on to stuff like Anne Rice. Quite a departure from one to the other. But that was what I grew up with. Those were my childhood books, and including this one as well. But yeah, this is my go-to for a palate cleanse. And when I read these, I pick one from each series every month to read. I'm reading them in order throughout. And it's nice, especially when you've got a few heavier books or stuff with difficult topics, to be able to pick up something like this and, you know, let's be realistic and not have to think too much about it. You know what I mean? They're really, really enjoyable to me. Number 10, magazine stand. If you read magazines or journals regularly, share some of the titles with us, and I really don't. I used to be a big magazine reader, but that has fell by the wayside. It's not something I indulge in. Every now and then, Overdrive from my library, for the Toronto Public Library, does have a lot of magazines available, and every now and then I'll pick up like a health and fitness magazine just for funsies, to pretend that I'm trying to be healthy and more fit. And then I return it. Magazines are not my go-to. I would much rather pick up a book now. But that's it, except for checkout, it says. Time to go home and unpack. Tag some shoppers on their way in. So I'm going to tag 4 of you guys. Rainy, if you're watching this, I'd love to see your answers. Chloe over at Always Booked. I'd love to hear your answers too. Bree over at Bree Hill. I do not know if you are a big tag person. I haven't seen you do a lot of them, But if you're interested, I'd love to hear your answers for this one. And of course, Karen over at Rather Be Reading. I love tagging her in videos. Her and Rainey are like my go-to people to tag in videos. Oh, and Shannon over at Shannon Riddler, because she's back doing videos now and has been for a little while. But I would love to see your answers as well, and I will leave them all linked in the description box below as well. So check those girls all out, please. And that is all that I have for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I've talked about, what you thought about them. And if I didn't tag you, but you still want to do this tag, please do feel free to go ahead and do it. And until my next video, everybody, take care and happy reading. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye, guys.